Some stories are so outlandish that you might think, well, that can't be true. Someone must have fabricated this. But as you delve into these tales, it becomes even more perplexing when you realize that they're based on real events. One such strange story is about the VanMeter visitor. VanMeter is a rural town in Iowa. With a population of around 1,500 in 2021, it is a small and unassuming place that would likely go unnoticed if it weren't for its peculiar history. The townsfolk reside in typical American single-family homes, their lives unfolding in a tranquil rhythm punctuated by the occasional visit to the local pizzeria or bar. In 1903, settlers arrived in the area, attracted by the promise of employment at a local mine. They founded the town of VanMeter, and for many years, the mine was the lifeblood of the community. Since the mine closed, VanMeter has been a quiet and uneventful town. However, beneath the veneer of normalcy lies a tale that has captivated the imaginations of those who have heard it. It was September 29th, 1903, shortly after midnight. U.G. Griffith, a tool dealer from VanMeter, was on his way home. Upon arriving at his apartment, he noticed a bright light on the roof of the neighboring house, casting its bright glow onto the street. The house was just a short distance from his own, a place he thought he knew well. However, this was unlike anything he had ever seen there before. Intrigued, Griffith decided to get a closer look. As he approached the building, the mysterious light seemed to detach itself from the roof and swiftly flew across the street to settle on another house. Griffith stood frozen in place. In 1903, there were very few things that could move through the air, like birds and hot air balloons. This was neither. Griffith watched the light on the roof for some time, only to see it suddenly vanish into the darkness of the night. On the same night, Dr. J. Allen, the village doctor, lay in his bed fast asleep. Suddenly something jolted him awake. A brilliant light beamed into his face. Still groggy, he slowly opened his eyes and needed a moment to get his bearings. But when he spotted the intense light, a shock surged through him. He vaguely made out the silhouette of a humanoid figure outside his window. From its head, a bright light was shining directly onto him. Thinking it might be a burglar, Dr. Allen leaped out of bed, grabbed his pistol, and rushed to the door. Outside, he found himself face to face with a figure 7 to 8 feet tall, with bat-like wings. The figure sported a glowing horn on its head. Panicked, he reportedly aimed his gun and fired 5 shots at the figure. However, the figure stood unfazed, intensifying the doctor's panic, causing him to sprint back into his house. He locked the front door and pushed against it with all his strength, but nothing happened. When he finally dared to peer outside, the creature had vanished. The next day, both the doctor and Griffith reported their experiences to the local sheriff, who found their accounts credible. Griffith and the doctor were known as serious, down-to-earth people in the town, and their statements remain on record to this day. However, their encounters wouldn't remain the only incidents in this regard. Just one evening later, the director of the local bank had a similar experience. By that time, news of the doctor's and Griffith's experiences had already spread in town. Fearing a potential burglar from outside might tamper with the bank director chose to spend the night in the bank with his shotgun. This was a time when alarm systems were non-existent, so he remained vigilant, guarding the bank. At 1 a.m., a sudden strange noise from outside caught his attention. He heard a rattling and wheezing sound, as if someone was struggling to breathe. The bank manager, gripping his gun tightly, watched as a bright beam of light pierced the large windows of the bank. Within that radiant light, he barely made out a human-like figure. Reacting swiftly, he leapt to his feet, unlocked the door, and rushed outside. There, he came face to face with the enigmatic being. His description of the figure mirrored the doctor's account, a 7-foot-tall entity with bat-like wings and a radiant horn atop its head. The bank manager raised his rifle and shot at the figure, and although he was sure he had hit it, the figure simply fled into the night. On the following morning, the sheriff, accompanied by a deputy and the bank manager himself, examined the location where the bank manager claimed to have fired upon the mysterious creature. However, no trace of blood was found. Despite this, the bank manager reaffirmed his belief that he had fired at the figure from close range and must have hit it. The figure had been standing on a patch of grass in front of the bank that night. The sheriff observed strange footprints in that area. These prints were similar to bird tracks, with 3 claws in the front and 1 in the rear. In his report, the sheriff documented creating plaster casts of these unusual footprints, although they are no longer existent today. Because of these 3 incidents, the entire town was in an uproar, prompting people to check their weapons to ensure they were in working order and carry them with them at all times. On the following night, O.W. Wilcox, the owner of a local hardware store, was abruptly awakened by a shrill scream. More screams followed, prompting Wilcox to cautiously peer out of his window. Opposite his house stood a telegraph pole, and upon it perched a figure that resembled a bird on a power line, gazing down. Swiftly, Wilcox grabbed his rifle, stepped outside and took aim, firing a shot at the mysterious figure. To his surprise, the shot seemed to have no impact, except for making the figure lift its head upward and fix its stare upon him. It was at that moment Wilcox became aware of an overpowering, noxious odor that overwhelmed his senses, causing him to stagger and nearly vomit. The gunshot and the screams had also woken up the co-owner of the hardware store, who rushed to the front of his house, which was just across the street. He witnessed a tall figure descending from the telegraph pole, but it only made it about halfway down before leaping to the ground, landing in a crouched position and slowly rising. The witness described this colossal figure as standing at least 7 feet tall, with wings, its face sporting a beak resembling that of a parrot, and legs somewhat akin to the legs of a kangaroo. On its head, there was a radiant horn emitting a beam of light. As the creature stood upright, it surveyed its surroundings, then executed a series of powerful leaps. With its final leap, it soared into the night. The strange events continued the following evening. John Van Meter, the owner of a brick factory on the outskirts of town, heard odd noises. They seemed to be emanating from the nearby abandoned coal mine. He described the cacophony as a mix of guttural screams, banging and scraping. Driven by curiosity, he approached the coal mine. As he got close, he noticed the strange noises coming from one of the entrances. As he neared the entrance, a massive winged figure suddenly emerged. But this time it wasn't alone. 2 smaller creatures followed, bearing the same shape but much smaller. All 3 sported glowing horns atop their heads, emitting a brilliant white light. The largest creature hissed at him menacingly, causing John to take a few fearful steps back and tumble to the ground. In a flash, all the creatures took flight. John shared his encounter with the sheriff, and the word spread rapidly, as it did with other sightings of these beings. In the local community center, they held a meeting to discuss the situation. It was suggested that the abandoned mine might be the perfect hiding spot for these creatures. Over the years, a labyrinth of countless shafts had formed within the mine, providing an excellent place for them to hide. The decision was made for local men to stand guard at night, heavily armed, awaiting the return of these mysterious beings. Armed with their weapons, the men stationed themselves at the entrance of the cave. They wouldn't have to wait too long when the 3 creatures landed right in front of them. The men opened fire, unleashing a hail of bullets, but inexplicably, the projectiles seemed to have no effect. A newspaper wrote that the reception given to the 3 beings would have been enough to send the Spanish fleet to the bottom of the sea, but except for the echoing sounds of gunfire and a strange odor, nothing else happened. Instead, the creatures calmly entered the mine's shaft. The men, undeterred, began the laborious task of filling the shaft. After several days of hard work, they sealed the entrance with massive rocks to ensure nothing could enter or exit. After sealing the mine shaft, the creatures were never seen again. This story has been passed down as a legend from generation to generation, gradually becoming a local tale used to frighten children around campfires. In 2013, 3 authors, Chad Lewis, Kevin Lee Nelson, and Noah Voss, began to get to the bottom of this story. What they discovered was truly astonishing. They uncovered records from the sheriff's office detailing the first 3 cases I've described here, along with numerous old newspaper reports that chronicled these unusual events. These reports included first-hand accounts from individuals who claimed to have encountered these winged creatures, as well as narratives from the men who had last seen the creatures at the coal mine. Despite their exhaustive efforts, no tangible evidence of the creature's existence emerged. Not a feather, nor any other physical proof was found. The sole potential physical evidence would have been plaster casts that the sheriff was rumored to have made, but regrettably, they appear to be lost to time. Weighing all the available testimony, these 3 authors were left to conclude that an event that defied all known laws of nature must have occurred. Kevin Lee Nelson, one of the authors, said in an interview that what happened there is still a mystery. The big question of who or what the Van Meter visitor was remains unanswered. In their book, the authors explore a variety of theories, from hoaxes to mass hysteria to extraterrestrial beings. The intriguing aspect of the Van Meter visitor lies in its array of unusual and seemingly extraterrestrial characteristics. These include a luminous horn, resonant metallic sounds, and an apparent resistance to conventional weapons. The authors propose that this entity's nature is beyond earthly understanding, drawing parallels to the Mothman due to its mysterious appearance and enigmatic actions. And indeed, the Van Meter visitor bears a striking resemblance to the Mothman, emerging a mere 60 years earlier. Their similarities go beyond mere appearance. Both were said to give off a sulfurous odor. The Van Meter visitor's origins have spawned many theories. Some believe it may have come to our world from a parallel dimension, either accidentally or intentionally. Others believe it to be extraterrestrial in origin. Some may ask why the authors didn't simply enter the tunnels. Well, they collapsed long ago, making them inaccessible. Uncovering them would be a dangerous and expensive endeavor, requiring heavy machinery and significant labor, which the authors lacked. Since the tunnels are inaccessible, there is no physical evidence to substantiate the stories about the Van Meter visitor. Only the eyewitness accounts and the sheriff's records remain. Without physical evidence, we cannot know for sure what happened in Van Meter in 1903. However, the sheriff's file and newspaper reports suggest that the events, which unfolded in Van Meter, were taken seriously at the time. But ultimately, the mystery of Van Meter remains unsolved. If you want, share your thoughts on what happened in the comments. Was it simply mass hysteria or a figment of collective imagination? Or was it something beyond our understanding? If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I hope to see you again in my next video. Thanks for watching.